We are live.
Hey, welcome everyone to Connected Learning TV. We're excited. We're in our third part of the series this month in September, which has been focused on back to school, creating the school year we'd like to live in. And we've been spending the month thinking about how you build classroom community, how you support inquiry. Today we're going to be talking about how you develop classrooms that support students seeing themselves as experts and contributors to the learning space. We're really excited. And I'm Kim Jaxon. I'm an associate professor of composition and literacy at California State University, Chico, which is in Northern California. And what's exciting today is we also have people from all over the country who are on the webinar with us, which is we've got West Coast, East Coast, and the middle represented. So it's exciting. We're hoping that today when you get to talk to Laura Gibbs and Kevin Hodgson and Jarret Krone, that you'll post questions for us also on Twitter and tweet out to your networks. We're using the hashtag, this is my high-tech prop here. We're using the hashtags Connected Learning and B2S for back to school. You can also post questions in the Q&A part of the video, and we're also being co-streamed with the National Writing Project on educatorinnovator.org. So welcome. And before we begin, we're hoping everyone can do a little bit of an introduction. And Laura, I'm hoping you'll start us off, and then Kevin, and then Jarret, a little bit about who you are and where you are.
Okay, can you hear me? Is that working? All right, so I get to represent, I think, the middle of the country, because I teach for the University of Oklahoma, but I teach online. And so I live in North Carolina. So I'm doing East Coast and Central Time here. I teach fully online courses in mythology and folklore and the epics of ancient India.
Great. Well, I'm Kevin Hodgson, and it's really nice to be here. And I know Laura from a number of different kind of online places, and Kim. And I teach 6th grade out in Western Massachusetts. So I guess I'm on the East Coast. The western part of the East Coast. And I'm also a co-director of technology with the Western Massachusetts Writing Project, and try to think a lot about digital literacies and how it's shaping and reshaping the way we think about writing and composition.
My name is Jarret Krone. I am a lecturer in composition and rhetoric at CSU Channel Islands. That is in Camarillo, California, and actually this is my 2nd year teaching, coming down from CSU Chico as a grad student, where I got to work with Kim, which was awesome.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, see, we've got the country kind of, I mean, I like that Laura kind of represents multiple parts of the country, and that you're fully online, so really you're just everywhere. It's a great thing. So we thought we'd kick off with the why question. So like I said, we're going to kind of think through the kinds of structures that we have in our classrooms that support students seeing themselves as experts and contribute to the learning. But I wanted to start with, like, why would we do that in the first place? Like, why would we want to share expertise in that way, especially if you think about faculty are usually supposed to hold all the expertise. So why would we want to do that? And Kevin, I thought maybe I could have you start us off. Just thinking about it from an elementary perspective, you know, the why would you go through the trouble, and then everybody can chime in.
Sure. I mean, I think you know, thinking about this idea of expertise and student engagement, you know, I think it comes from the idea of trying to get students to kind of look at themselves and their lives a bit, and think about the things that they value, and how to tap into those things they value to make it meaningful in a classroom. And sometimes it takes some kind of pushing out beyond the boundaries of what they expect school is too, I think, and we see this at different levels. That I know over the last few years, as I've really kind of talked to my students about things they do outside of school, particularly in technology, I'm kind of floored by the things that they're doing around fan fiction and video games and video production, things that aren't always valued in our classroom, I would say, and thinking about how to try to pull some of those into our kind of learning environment is a really key part, I think, of what I try to think about. You know, I hope I'm successful sometimes, and I know I'm not at other times. But the idea is to think about every student having that kind of value point that they can pull into the classroom community. And, you know, it also leads into teaching about empathy, too, about seeing their classmates and seeing other people in a much bigger picture than maybe they even imagine. And, you know, the way you do that is by making people aware of the things that you're interested in and expertise. So I think it has a lot of value, and certainly at the beginning of the year when, you know, I'll just talk from the elementary level. I mean, we spend a good part of the beginning of the year trying to build a sense of community in the classroom, and that includes getting to know students. And, you know, a lot of them know each other already because they've been following each other up from preschool to 6th grade and beyond, but I'm new to them, so I think it gives them a chance, too, to bring out parts of them that maybe even their classmates don't know. So, you know, that sense of expertise at the beginning of the year is really a key anchor that, that kind of moves us forward into what we're going to do for the rest of the year, too. I think you're muted, Kim. Yeah. Kim, you're muted.
Thanks. You know, I don't click very well, so that's not my expertise, apparently. Laura, I was going to have you chime in just because I think what's going to be immediately apparent is that this going from this 6th grade environment to fully online, and I think you're going to have different kinds, I would imagine, of challenges in helping students see expertise. So I thought maybe we could pick up on, Kevin makes a good point here about this idea of value point. So why do you have students, you know, think about students as developing expertise, but how do you find that out when it's a fully online environment and you're not just seeing them face to face every day?
Yeah, and that's what's really interesting about what Kevin said, because on the one hand you think, oh, it's so different, right? Because it's 6th grade, it's not college, it's in the classroom, and I'm online, but actually what I'm doing is exactly the same as what Kevin's doing. And what he said about the big picture is what I'm trying to get at too. You know, is that big picture, our class, whatever that thing is composed of the expertise of all the students. And so I have to find a way to build a space to let that happen. And for me, it happens through their blogs. Everybody blogs right from day one of the class. And one of the most important posts they have is their introduction post, where they talk about exactly the kinds of things that Kevin mentioned, the things they do outside of class, the things that are valuable, meaningful, important to them. And that those blogs become a kind of persistent network, which is great because, you know, in the first week of class, we're talking about back to school, it's overwhelming. There are these 80 people. I don't know their names. I don't, you know, 5 of them are named Lauren. It's confusing. But when they build this space of their own and they leave this trail of what they're interested in at the beginning of the class, week to week to week, it builds into something that is exactly like that kind of big picture that Kevin was talking about. And I just love it that way because I can't do enough for these students. It's fully online. I'm not in the room. There's no room for me to be in as the expert. And I'm great with that. I don't want to be the expert, but I need a way for them to be experts to each other. So we do it with blogs, and it works great.
So why don't I go ahead and jump in? Yeah, kind of following up with Kevin's, what he was talking about values and stuff like that. I feel like the beginning of every semester we have to do a lot of conversation and kind of rethinking and kind of reassessing values and what kind of real rigorous work can look like in the university. So I try to like build off of things that they maybe are comfortable with, platforms that they do every day effectively. You know, they're great at telling stories through images. That's something that they do every day. They're many of them, you know, are capturing moments of their life from morning to evening when they go to bed. So part of what I'm having them do the first week is taking pictures as a way to construct a narrative about how about what their college experience looks like, and then comparing that image with an image they're going to take later on in the semester, and then start to make claims and give some ideas about how they have changed as a student, how they've evolved as a person. And so, yeah, I think they come in with this idea that, like, I'm just going to continue to do book reports. I'm going to continue to kind of employ this 5-paragraph essay in whatever way I can. And so it's kind of this restructuring of ideas around, like I said, what real work can look like, and that it is this broad range of things and not as narrowly defined as maybe they came in thinking.
Oh my God, I always steal your assignments, so I'm stealing that assignment. I really like the idea of the narrative of their college experience through image and then returning to that. And then, so now I'm wondering, like, all of you are kind of talking about, in some way there's this thread of, like, both a getting to know, and I'd like to hear Kevin talk a little bit more about that, like how you get to know what your students do outside your class. Because Laura's already talked about blogs, and I love that as a way to get to know them. Jarret's talking about image, so I'd be curious about that. And the other thing it seems like everyone's doing is kind of a disruption of the traditional model of you as expert and the student only as receiver of information. And so I'm wondering if we could maybe start to think about structures that we have in place that disrupt that. But Kevin, could you weigh in first on, like, how, I'm assuming you just talk to them, but I'll bet there's more to it than that. Just, you know, how do you find out that they are writing fan fiction and things like that?
Well, I think, yeah, a big part of it is community meetings that kind of set the tone for the classroom and how to move forward. And, you know, you learn a lot from those 10 or 15-minute meetings in the mornings. And actually, this year has been kind of odd because we had to expand all of our writing and math time in our day. For us, what it's meant is that we've kind of lost that. We had to take out part of that community building time in our mornings. And, you know, you think 5 or 10 minutes a day is, you know, that's not a whole lot of time, but we're really feeling it, actually. We're feeling a little disconnected from our kids, and I'm sure they're not expressing it, but they probably feel a little disconnected from us as a community too. It's been one of these kind of weird things going on this year, and we haven't quite sorted it out. And it maybe we'll talk about this later, but there's a lot of tension between mandates that come down from the top and how to fit in the things that we see as having value and how to kind of keep that balance there. And there was a great piece like a week or so ago by Bill Ferreter, who tweets plugs us in, I think it is. Sorry, Bill. And but he wrote about this, about, you know, the tension that he feels about doing really creative projects where students are really pushing themselves, and then he gets standardized testing results back, and he does the worst on his hallway, and, you know, he's called under the carpet for that. And, you know, like, how do we kind of find those kind of moments? And so it's a struggle, I think, that we're going on. But we have a lot of conversations, and actually at the beginning of the year we do a lot of comics in our classroom. So we do a project called Dream Scenes, which I just shared out the other day, where students write about their aspirations for the future in the form of a webcomic. And so I know Jarret's talking about image a little bit, and we talk about image as part of the compositional nature. And for me, it's a great starting point to have discussions as they're working kind of one-on-one about, you know, why they want to go to MIT to become an engineer or open up their own bakery, or, you know, some of them wrote about being game designers and other things that, you know, right at the beginning of the year, it gives me a little insight into them and allows us to have a conversation about that's your dream, you know, then how are you going to get there? And that's part of what we're doing. So, yeah, I think it's a lot of talk. I mean, and finding time to do that, you know, gets tricky sometimes. I don't think we always, in education, at least in K-12, value that as much as we should anymore, those kind of conversations.
Yeah, I agree. And I find it incredibly challenging when I only see students sometimes 3 times a week for 50 minutes to get. And like Laura, I learn a lot about them through blogging. You know, I do find out through blogs. I'm trying a new structure this semester. We've been reading Donald Miller's Reading in the Wild in 2 of my classes that are for future elementary school teachers. And we're playing a lot with notebooks as a way to trace learning reflection. And I'm hoping those notebooks also give me insights into their goals as future teachers and things that they already bring to our space that they're good at. And actually, what's funny, listening to both you and Jarret, we've been drawing a lot more than doing text. So we've been taking, for example, Donald Miller's ideas and drawing what our classroom space might look like based on all her principles of teaching reading, and that's been an interesting way to, as always happens, finding out someone who's actually really good at using visual to tell an idea or to share an idea, and getting recognized for that kind of expertise in ways that they may not have when they're only asked to describe through text. And so I like how different kinds of modes can also bring that out for students as well. Laura, what else do you do? I know you do tons of things. I know you guys have a wiki and some other things. Besides the blogging, what are the kinds of other structures that students participate in to take some responsibility in your classes?
Well, they choose what different kinds of tools they want to use, and that's been something really interesting to see. You know, who likes to make memes, right? Making memes is great. Everybody can become like immediately a graphic design expert, right? Because they make a meme. They share those. Some people are really into Pinterest, and so they like to save stuff and share it through Pinterest. About half the class makes websites. And what I love is when there's students who have some great technical abilities, and they bring that back to the class. So I use a system called Tech Tips, where it's extra credit, you know, because I'm not supposed to be doing all this technology, right? I'm supposed to be teaching the epics and mythology. But we use these tech tips where I can, you know, push them along. Do you want to learn how to do X, Y, Z? And then they can write tech tips where they share their expertise with the rest of the class. So I've got some people doing Tumblrs for their projects, and they're going to write up tech tips about how to do Tumblrs. Other people went and explored these things about Blogger templates I never even knew before, and they shared that back with the class. And so if you just, you know, open up that structure like Kevin was saying, and just find out what people want to learn how to do, like what expertise do they want to gain, and then find out what they have and just come up with ways to share it. You know, it's not theoretically complicated. It's more like what Kim said at the beginning. It's just wanting to do it. And if you decide this is important and you want to do it, I'm sure everybody can find ways to do this in their classroom, online, whatever. You just have to want to make it happen.
I think that, sorry, Jarret, if I'm jumping in on you here. I'm just thinking something that you said, Laura, which is, you know, that it's always fascinating to me, and it ties in nicely with this idea of expertise, is how quickly a student will discover a workaround and it goes viral in the classroom in, like, you know, 5 seconds. And often those are the students that are not the kind of social top of the ladder kids. Not that they're always the opposite either, but they're often not the ones, you know, leading the class in whatever the kind of activity is when they're in their kind of natural state of kids being kids. But the idea of they suddenly kind of discover something and they are the expert in that moment is really a powerful thing to see. And also, you can't plan for it. I mean, you can hope for it, I think, but you can't kind of point to, you know, Bobby across the room and say he's the one who's going to discover, you know, how to get around this website block today, you know, whatever it is. You know, I think that, you know, seeing those and kind of noticing those and bringing that to attention to the class about what's happening, I think is a really powerful moment of empowerment for kids who might not otherwise feel that social capital.
Yeah, well, I think what's really cool there, Kevin, is you're right. You can't plan for those moments, but you can make sure that they're seen as valuable, right? You can definitely, over time, your students can come to see that workarounds and subversion and other kinds of expertise, and even sometimes saying back to the teacher, you know, there's an easier way to do that than the way you're futzing with at the front of the room there. The moments that you make sure that's okay, like, thank you for telling me, thank you for, will make it happen, I think, more. You know, I think then it's like, oh, that's okay to be like that in here. It's not making the teacher feel bad. It's.
And if I could chime in about writing,
Yeah.
but when the students share their writing, especially creative writing, it's so easy for them to show an expertise in a particular style, you know, and so when the students look at each other's writing and they say, oh wow, I never knew you could tell a story that way, because they've literally never seen a story told in whatever style it is that some other student used, they can learn that from each other in a way that they would never be able to from me. So it's not just about technology. I think we're kind of used to the idea that students can be technology experts, but in terms of writing expertise, I don't know what Jarret does in his classes. I know Kevin does all kinds of fabulous creative stuff. I gave up the traditional expository type of writing a long time ago for creative writing, and students really can be experts in creative writing because they can bring the kinds of movies and TV and literature that they love into that writing and bring it to life that way, and then that goes viral. Just like Kevin said, somebody uses like a particular style of poetry to tell a story, and then everybody else who saw that says, I could do that, I can try that too. And for me as a teacher, that's the thing I love best, because I think they will learn about technology on their own from each other, but not necessarily about storytelling and creative writing. So I love making a class that can be about that expertise too.
Yeah, and if I could just comment a little bit on that idea that Kevin brought up about expert in the moment. And I think that is, you know, in a phrase, exactly what I'm trying to do every day, is highlight those moments where students can emerge to take over the role. I mean, those are the golden moments when we can kind of step back a little bit, you know, and then they can come to the forefront. Today we're working with narrative, and pardon my voice, I've been sick for the last couple of days, so that's why it's like that. But anyway, we're working with narrative, and we're trying to have them flesh out, you know, interesting characters and kind of enliven their characters and enliven these settings that in which they're describing their college experience. So, you know, the complexity on their parents' faces when they, you know, when they said goodbye as they left for college for the first time, and how there was both sadness and pride and joy and stuff like that. And so one of my students had just this, you know, amazing description of kind of his process of capturing this picture and how it was kind of symbolic of these other things. So I love those moments when we can point out, like, you are doing something better than like I could ever do. Like, can you lead us in showing us how, like, that mindset, or kind of how you went about this process, because they all access these assignments from different perspectives and from different ways. You know, the way I imagine an assignment and the way that they take up the assignment is completely different than the way that they may actually take it up. So part of like what I like to do is think of the syllabus and all of my assignments as flexible, dynamic documents that evolve and take shape throughout the semester, that aren't just kind of, you know, locked in place and you follow it. That they kind of critique and ask questions about, and feel open enough to kind of revise as we go. So yeah.
Jarret, I know one of the things that you do that kind of riffs off of what Laura was talking about too, that I'm going to make you share because I stole it at one point. But let's think about the ways that we make the student work public. And I like Kevin's point too, that he's on our chat about, you know, not just the product but the process. And so, Jarret, I thought you could lead us off. Can you talk a little bit about, I know you don't do this practice all the time anymore, but you had a Tumblr review board that I stole, and one of the ways that we highlight good, you know, to say a student is doing good work is we have a winning Tumblr board, and students nominate blogs to have put up there. So, Jarret, can you say a little bit how you first, and I know you have ways that you kind of still do that, make student work public.
Yeah, sure. So something I like to try to do with kind of, whether we're thinking about what, whether we're considering like what useful feedback looks like, or what you know, students need from their fellow peers, what they need from me, and what they need from the space as a whole, is kind of setting up some norms for ourselves, setting up some criteria points that we can all kind of agree upon. So the idea with this blog, and I haven't used Tumblr in a few semesters, but you know, you can kind of replace this idea with really anything. is that they establish the types of criteria that make an effective blog. And maybe that criteria changes depending on what medium they're creating, whether it's a website or a blog or a graphic, not novel, but a series of images or whatever the thing might be. So they create the criteria that they ultimately assess their peers upon. And then, yeah, so they're kind of holding each other accountable for what great work looks like or what interesting ideas look like, and kind of and in setting up this criteria are more comfortable in kind of pointing out moments where they think they could have taken certain ideas further, or stuff like that. So as much as possible, I like the students to kind of be doing this work of assessing ideas and evaluating, the ideas that are being brought forth by all of the students.
Kevin, how do you make your student work public? What are all the different ways? Are the webcomics are published? Yeah.
Yeah. We have a classroom blog that we use. It's become less of a publishing site and more of a launching site, I think. And it's used in different ways. Our webcomic site, you can make comics public or not. We have a lot of privacy issues we have to keep in mind for kids who are under 13. So that's at the forefront. But we have a class YouTube account where when we do digital stories and other things, we'll publish it up there. We have a SoundCloud account where we do podcasting. We have our blog. We have a webcomic site. We use a video gaming site, GameStar Mechanic, that allows you to share outside of the gaming environment as well. So it's one of those things where we're trying to balance protection of kids' identity with publishing an authentic audience, and kind of how to find that balance line there. And so, all those things I think are just things that we kind of keep in mind. And, we put out our own kind of, literary magazines and classroom from time to time, particularly around poetry and other things. And so I think publishing takes a lot of different forms, and some is more high-stakes publishing, and some is more low-stakes publishing. So I think like podcasting for us, I've often used it as a way to move from like a writing prompt into kind of getting it out with your voice and kind of talking about the idea of changing mediums. So Jarret was talking about mediums a little bit earlier, and just kind of thinking about what shifts happen when you move from writing on the page to hearing a voice. Reading out the kind of writing and all those kind of things are, just really fascinating to talk about, even with 11-year-olds, because they often don't think about those kind of things. And so kind of allowing some kind of entry point to begin thinking about that hopefully kind of pushes out into their lives outside of school, too. Gets them thinking of more of the things that they're doing, the way they're communicating, which they don't always see as writing, in their lives, is writing. So I think it's interesting.
Actually, yeah, I like when the writing disappears, right? It becomes, you don't say I'm writing, you say I'm trying to do this thing, right? I'm trying to elect someone to president, and you're writing, but you wouldn't say I'm writing, right? You say I'm doing this other thing. I like it when students have those moments, right, where it just becomes another resource that they can use to be heard.
Yeah, it's almost like the education system grabbed that term of writing and composition and jammed it into a 9-to-5 day and said anything you do outside of here we're not going to consider writing, right?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they're texting, they're posting comments on their favorite YouTube video, they're kind of writing fan fiction and doing all sorts of things, but they, in their head, don't think of that as writing because it's not valued in the school system. And so, trying to, and I know a lot of people are doing this, is really try to push down those walls and make it more authentic, that the things we're doing here, there's no way to know, they're 11 years old, what the world's going to look like when they graduate from college, right? It's impossible to know, but the skills you can teach them about thinking about communication and composition, hopefully transcend whatever weird technology or, trends suddenly come along that we have no clue what it is, and, that they'll have some skills to be ready for that world. I mean, you guys at the college, you have a little bit better sense of what the world looks like for a lot of them, but so far, a little bit, but for us, it's just so far away that, it's, you have to be general enough and yet analytical enough, too, for them to navigate all that.
Yeah. Actually, Kevin, and I'll let Laura jump in here because I haven't. You're reminding me, I say to often my future teachers, I've got enough distance now that I know what it is about my fourth grade education that did or did not transfer to my adult life, right? And so all the time we spent learning handwriting, not so much, right? That's not necessarily a practice that I use much anymore. But having a teacher who encouraged ways of being, like a little bit of no fear or trying out different kinds of modes. I had a teacher that was really interested in theater, so we did that, right? Like there were these, like failure's good. Like I kind of learned that from some really good elementary school teachers. That wasn't seen as a bad thing to reiterate. That has stuck with me. Like I think that's why I'm a gamer and a geek and all these other things, because those identities are the things that I held, not necessarily the specific skills. And so that part's interesting. Then I want to go back really fast to what Jarret said about these ways that you also make student work public. When I stole this idea from Jarret, one of the best things about it was I was then meeting with a small group of students outside of class time, and instead of being the bloggers, they were the readers of bloggers. And they were almost seeing behind the curtain of the classroom because we were meeting once a week for an hour. We were reading blogs together. We were developing the criteria that week for what makes a blog a good blog, which always changed. And so they almost could see what it was like to be the teacher, right? Like what kinds of decision rules do you have to make and how do you highlight? And then they were seeing the added effect of their peers being so excited that they were nominated by them to be the featured blog that week. So there was that time, I think, where they felt kind of like they were getting insider special privileges or something, even though it was college. And then, of course, because they were a small group of a big class of 100, they were letting me in on things, the behind the scenes, right, what was really working in class and what wasn't. Like we were getting comfortable. So I really appreciate that structure, and I've tried to build it in other ways. Laura, you want to jump in on any of this? I've cut you off like twice now.
Oh, I can relate so much to what everybody is talking about. And I guess the one thing I really liked about what Kevin was saying was this idea of the class as a group doing things together. And that's something that you really struggle with in higher ed because you've got these individuals, they're taking these classes, they're not in a cohort the way that Kevin's students are, and they're getting individual grades, and we haven't even talked about, the disaster that is grading and how grading really confuses the business of what expertise is and how we acquire it. But with writing, because it's holistic, because you need readers and you need feedback, I love the way that the expertise becomes naturally a collective kind of experience, right? So if I have great projects in the class every semester, and they're great projects every semester, and some of them get voted, best in the class, but it's not even exactly a competitive kind of thing. If people are put off by the idea of nominations and all of that Jarret had mentioned, that's something I worried about too, but everybody has such a sense that we're achieving this together. If you have a process that's shared all semester long where everybody is reading each other's stuff and you're sharing your ideas and your feedback and your expertise, when you end up with a bunch of really awesome products at the end of that group process, that collective class level process, everybody can feel good about it. And that's something that I try to do all the time, is to promote the idea that, we're here, we're this class, and we're so big, like in my myth folklore class, there might be 60 students. They don't even know each other all individually, but we're still a class because we're sharing all this stuff. And look, you can go look at it. Here it all is. It's all together in this online space. And I don't know what size classes Jarret teaches, but in some ways that bigness is good, because if we're talking about collective expertise, having more people around means you have a wider range of styles, topics, interests, experiences, expertise. So I didn't know if we're going to talk about class size, but I did want to advocate for the possibility of doing these kinds of inquiry-driven, shared, student-centered learning, even in classes that would rank as medium, largish at the college level. It's worked for me. It's you just got to make sure that everybody in the class feels connected to some other people in the class, even if they don't know all the people, and let the big picture take care of itself.
Yeah, I've been thinking kind of a little bit about um, alternate ways that I can assess the work of students. Um, and part of this, my idea, I'm a kind of an active reader of Reddit. I'm on Reddit a lot, and I'm interested in kind of how people can move from like new posts to hot posts, so the posts that get upvoted and shared the most. And so part of my idea for one of my classes last year which is a rhetoric class, was maybe part of my assessment can be how successfully and widely they can circulate these pieces of rhetoric that they create, whether it's about plastic bags, other types of environmental issues, or other types of social, cultural issues. And I kind of like that a lot. So students kind of got into pairs, they got into groups, and kind of based on papers that they wrote previously in the semester, got into some sort of similar common groups, and they created a common piece of rhetoric that had some sort of persuasive message about something. And I kind of graded them for that final project on how widely they could circulate it and how well they documented that circulation of those pieces of rhetoric, and how people kind of engaged and participated with those kind of outsiders from the world, and how they kind of engaged with those pieces of rhetoric, the dialogue around those pieces of rhetoric. So I thought that was kind of I want to try to do that again this semester. I thought that was an interesting way to think about kind of assessment, other than just you get an A, you get a B, you get like that kind of stuff.
Did you get any pushback, Jarret, from students who might say, I love your class, but social media is not my thing, and I don't want to put my work out there? And so how does that fall into that kind of assessment?
Always. So today actually is funny. My students were trying to convince me that they're not internet people, which I don't get, because we were working with memes, and for the most part, no one really knew, or maybe they were just being timid. But they were excuse me, they were trying to tell me they weren't internet people. So there's always a little bit of pushback, but I think through the use of their kind of meeting up with peers and getting in groups, that pushback usually kind of dissolves a little bit. But I'm interested in that too, and like how we kind of overcome that. And I know these are things Kim's experienced, because I've been in class with her, but students that want to be told which direction to go in, right? And instead of kind of determining their own avenues for getting at ideas, they want you to lead them. And I think it's most interesting when when students don't just follow me, right? When I can follow them. That's the moment I love.
Yeah, I remember going. I was asked to kind of visit an undergraduate classroom at a local university, and they wanted me to do like a lesson around digital storytelling. I thought, this is great. Go in. There's 20-year-olds. They got to be excited. The room was like dead silent. They didn't ask any questions, and they just wanted to be told like what to do. So I couldn't believe it. It was so bizarre. And I think either they were intimidated by I don't consider myself an expert at digital storytelling, but maybe they perceived a stranger coming in, knew all the kind of tricks of the trade or whatever it was, and it was just really bizarre. I was really hoping for them to really get engaged and kind of say and think about. Maybe they weren't internet people. Maybe that was my assumption going in, right? There's got to be a meme about I'm not an internet person now. Jarret, we got to get that going. But that idea of self-perception, I think too. We see that a lot in and Laura knows this too, because we kind of run in some of the same online kind of inquiry circles. And Kim, that even people who join in there who are on the periphery, part of the community that they're kind of watching happen, when really they are, when they just take that step in. And also then the opposite is trying to value those people too in their contribution of, we'll try to move away from that lurking kind of concept, because I think that has too much negative baggage with it, but the idea of trying to watch before you take your first step, and if you're in there, how do you help people take that first step in?
Yeah, Kevin, you're actually picking up on a question we got earlier on Twitter, which is, when do things backfire, or what do you do when tech things or whatever in the classroom, or anything, it doesn't be tech, it could be writing, backfires. And when the question got posted, I thought, well, every day something I never leave teaching and nailed it, ever. Always walk out. There's something about getting more comfortable with that, knowing in some ways it's all an experiment and I'm trying something out, and sometimes it doesn't go the way, people don't take it up the way I thought they would, or they do something more interesting, or silence or whatever. I really do want to get the "we're not internet people" trending. Almost every time I do a workshop, someone asks, and I know Laura gets this all the time, someone asks, how much time do you spend on the web? And I think, all of it. All of it. What do you even mean? All the time. I take walks. I just hashtag it walking in Capay. I'm still Instagramming when I'm on my walk. So I know we're not internet people all the time. So yeah, I'm wondering about if you guys sharing, the backfiring. I mean, I expect it. I value the backfiring. It doesn't scare me. So I don't in that same way. So I wonder what experiences you've all had with, it didn't work.
If I could chime in about that, I found a new system for this semester that I'm really liking, because I've always used growth mindset stuff in the background of my class in terms of designing the class around the idea that you just revise everything all the time. Nothing's finished. There's good things, there's mistakes, whatever. You're just constantly revising, and that's natural for a writing class. But this semester I decided to take that growth mindset and actually make it a topic for the students to engage in if they want. It's optional, but it's going well. I mean, a lot of students are interested in doing this, and for me as a teacher, it is such a great rhetorical option to have, where if a student had something go not well, I can turn that around and say, make that your growth mindset challenge for this week. So this fantastic student, great writer, she turned in this story that was colossally long, way too long for other people to read, and she'd just gotten excited and hand-checked the word count at the end, so it was way too long. And so I didn't want to just tell her, oh, this is long, you have to make it shorter. I said, why don't you make that your growth mindset challenge for the week to shorten up that story, and you can help me write a growth mindset challenge to share with all the other students about what do you do when you have something that's too long, you want to shorten it up or need to shorten it up. And that worked great because she got feedback, she worked on the story, she wrote a growth mindset challenge to share with the other students. It's just, I'm not into panaceas. It's not a panacea, I guess, but it's the closest thing to a panacea that I've found for backfires, because it just folds it right back into the class. It's like every backfire, whatever we want to call it, becomes another opportunity to play another growth mindset game in the class. So that's been working great for me this semester.
Yeah, I'm with you, Kim. That every day I walk out saying that didn't go the way I thought it was going to go. I can't think of any huge tumbles that put things in jeopardy in my classroom, kind of thing. But I think that you have to. You don't have to. I feel like I have to kind of push things and see where they go, and it doesn't mean I go in willy-nilly and not think through the possibilities for my students, because that would be irresponsible. But I don't always know where things are going to end up, and I'm pretty much okay with that for the most part. I think that things go in certain directions, and you have to make adjustments. And I think the worst time, it's not even that bad, but it's kind of funny, is we were we were studying some Shakespeare in our kind of origins in English language kind of unit. And on our weblog at the time, I had embedded this Shakespeare insult generator, which of course I should have thought about, right? But I did try it, and it looked cool, and it was fine. And the kids get on there, and of course it starts pulling up really inappropriate Shakespearean insults for sixth graders. And it just happened to be the time where the weblog was under maintenance, so nobody could access and kind of get rid of the generator. It's just one of those weird moments when you realize I'm really probably not in control as much as I'd like to be in this moment. But it was fun. But it was just kind of the unexpected, I think, happens, and that's if it didn't happen, I think teaching would not be very exciting if everything always went according to plan.
Yeah. Even as you guys are talking, I've been thinking that my backfire would be something that I set up that got in the way of a student participating. That would be a backfire. Like if I created a structure and there was only one way to do it and then a student couldn't find a way in, that would be a backfire. And I think I'm still not there, but I've gotten better at offering up multiple ways into an assignment so that doesn't happen. But just recently on our campus, we've changed our wireless network, and on any given day, I have 5 or 6 students who can't connect to the web. And our IT's been very responsive. To their credit, they're trying to solve the problem, but they're kind of okay with 5 or 10 students not being able to be on the network. And I've had to explain that I can't have one student who can't. Like that, I can't create a structure. For example, they blog across my sections. They have blogging buddies across sections, and I like to use the first 10 minutes sometimes on Mondays where they're responding to that partner, to that colleague. Well, if I have 5 students who have to leave the room to go find a space, that I can't do that structure anymore. And so I've moved to pen and paper and swapping pen and paper, which is a technology. It's fine. It's just not ideal because I don't have the same kind of record. But so I, in my more thoughtful self, I think a backfire for me would be, oh, I created this thing and now a student can't access it, or not every student can access it. And I think really carefully about that.
Kind of reminds me of something that Bud Hunt once wrote. I don't know when it was, but he was talking about true technology, kind of, or thinking about how technology can push learning. That if you have a backup plan, then it's not. But the reality is, our wireless goes down too sometimes, and I'm like, oh, the whole day was going to be, spent doing whatever it was, and now I gotta go to Plan B, and I don't really have a Plan B right now because Plan A was the plan. So it's just kind of interesting that we're still, I guess, particularly in this country, if you read about like how other parts of the world, particularly in Asia, right, where the kind of broadband everything is really much more stable, much more faster, that we're really behind the curve in that way of still trying to access across not just the wireless in my school, but for my kids who don't all come from wealthy homes, access is still an issue.
So let's go back to, Laura started to bring up something we haven't addressed, and usually people wish that we would, which is this thought about assessment. I know that most of us are not super big fans of, I'm not a fan of grades. I have to be honest, I'm not a fan of grades. I am a fan of assessment. I am a fan of knowing where my students are doing well and where they're having a hard time, and how I can move them. They don't have to move in the same way, but I'm moving them, and I'm moving myself in some way towards an activity. So I'm wondering, Kevin, I know that you think yes about badging and those kinds of things. Yes? Is that fair? No? Okay, well, we'll get Peter Kittle weighed in. Or maybe some of you have played with the idea of badging. I'm wondering about that as a solution. Or just how you do approach assessment. I use portfolios, and I do a lot with portfolio grading and honoring the process and having students write a lot of reflections and statements and memos around the work that they produce. So that's one way I work with it. What do the rest of you do as far as assessment in these messier classrooms?
I've got a lot to say about this. I think about it a lot, and in terms of Kim mentioned in the chat the affordances of being online, one of the things that happens when you're online and you don't have that default space of the classroom is that you really can make everything that the students do visible in some way. Either they do it, they make it, they share it, they engage somehow. And so the way I do the grading is that there are probably, like, over the course of a semester, like 150 things that students do week by week. They read, they write, they respond, they create, they reflect, they do all these things, and I just, they're each worth a couple points, and they go in the learning management system. We use D2L, and they take what's called a quiz, but it's not really a quiz. It just says, I did X, yes, true, false quiz, and they accumulate all these points, and they get a grade at the end of the semester, and it's not a competitive grade. They're not being assessed one against the other, but it's a process grade because it's about all the stuff that they've done. And because I have faith in the process, I have faith that if they do these 150 or 200 things, it's a lot of stuff, they will have learned a lot by the end of the semester. And so that's really worked for me. And some students then can use it as a way to say, this is a gen ed class, I'm really busy with other things, I've got a full-time job, I've got 3 kids, I'm taking a capstone class. I set it up so that they can just, if they want to get a C, they get a C. They don't do 200 things, they do 130 things, whatever. So it's ultimately kind of arbitrary the way all grading is, but it is a way to be flexible and let them make choices, because this theme of choice has been coming up again and again. There are all kinds of expertise we could hope students achieve. I think letting them choose what kinds of expertise they want to focus on, and then finding a way to let that be reflected in the grading is really important. We can't get away from the grading, but if you can let them make choices, focus on the process, it is possible to do grading in a way that's not detrimental. That's my biggest hope, I guess.
Yeah, if I could just pick up on that idea of students having the choice in how we view their work, or the work that they think is best kind of representative of them. I really like this kind of writing studio idea that I've done on Prezi before. Typically Prezi is about kind of creating presentations, but I've used it just kind of as a space where people can construct kind of connected ideas and construct kind of ideas moving outward. And I've used it as a place where they can kind of post their best writing, and like I was talking about before, setting up criteria for what that best looks like and why they think the writing that they've chosen, whether it's 5 or 6 pieces, sections of their paper, whether it's certain types of feedback they gave to one of their peers on a certain day, anything, really any of that kind of work of the class as we've looked at it, and it lets them kind of choose and frame the way that we perceive them at the end of the semester, or rather perceive the quality of their work. And so I really like when they have a kind of a role to call attention to these highlight points. And I guess typically the writing studio is where people write everything down, right? It's like not just their best ideas, but it's everything. But I guess in this case it's more kind of the highlights. It's the highlight reel of their work from the semester, and so I really like giving them that chance.
Hey Kevin, how do you balance the institutional desires for assessment with maybe how do you augment? You must augment. You must do other things that you like for assessment in addition. Yes, is that?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of what actually we're all saying here, which is a lot of reflective writing on the parts of students, trying to set up rubric style wide enough for every student to be successful, but specific enough to talk about some skills they're getting at, which is what the administrators on one hand want to see, and parents. So our students, we're not just teaching students, we're also kind of dealing with parents who also want to know what they're learning, rightfully so. And so trying to pull that all together, but I still struggle with the assessment of digital work and kind of what it looks like, and kind of grapple with the things that make sense. And I think it's the reflective writing that, for me, is the best kind of part of seeing what students have learned and how to kind of assess that. And like I like Jarret's idea of Prezi because it's like this huge, never-ending kind of canvas, right? You can even hide pieces of your writing on there if you wanted, and yet it's all kind of there together. And we are, you know, we've done some writing portfolios in the past, but we're this year they're kind of push us into some digital portfolios. So I'm trying to really kind of learn more myself about, you know, what that looks like and how best to pull it into our classroom for all our students, and kind of move forward with that. And I think I have Troy Hicks, you know, book on assessment downstairs that I'm hoping will unlock all the doors for me. Counting on him.
Yeah. I always hope that his book will in the limited time we have left, I'm going to make you, I'm hoping you'll, I can't make you do anything. I'm going to ask you to do something hard. So, new teacher, if you think about a new teacher, what would be your sound bite, like day one? How would you help students know this is a class that's going to value what they think? So what would be, you know, a structure you could suggest for my new future teachers? And you have to do it sound bitey.
I vote for creating a space where you can see what students are doing. And that's going to be different in a classroom. It's going to be different online. But this theme of space has come up over and over again here. And how do we create a space that's about the students and their expertise? What is that going to look like? If you think about that, I bet great things will happen.
I think, you know, coming in with the philosophy that the students are going to be the teachers of the classroom, you know, and not that you're giving up any of your authority as the teacher, but that you're open to turning things over to their interests is one way to go.
Yeah, and just building in structures where there are loose parameters, but plenty of room for them to swim, and to just have conversations around what kind of their expectations of rigorous writing looks like, and kind of the writing and work that they're doing already, and how some of those interests can fit into some of our purposes in academia.
Love it. You know, and Laura, I love your stuff about space because you can make a wall in your room, right? It doesn't even be a virtual space. It could be a wall in your room where my highlight reel, maybe students even choose, here's the thing I want on the wall this week. And it could be a sentence, it could be an image, it could be whatever. Or it's a virtual space where it's shared out. So it just seems so doable that you would just have that up. I want to thank you all for such a great conversation. I have to wrap up the third in this series, and I can't wait to rewatch because this one had a lot of ideas I will now steal and tweet about as if they were my own. I'll give you credit. So we're hoping, we have to end the conversation, but we're hoping if you want, you can continue the conversation on Twitter using the hashtags. I always have to do this, hashtag Connected Learning or B2S for back to school. We'll have Connected Learning folks. Liana will have a full video recording available too for archive on Connected Learning TV. And a really cool thing that you can sign up for is the newsletter. If you go to connectedlearning.tv, you can sign up for their email newsletter, and it gives you the upcoming events, including the one that's next Tuesday, 4 o'clock Pacific time. And we're going to end this month talking about nurturing our professional lives. So how do we nurture our own growth in a very busy semester? And I'm so excited because we get to talk with Mino Ramey, who wrote the book Thrive, and Paul Hankins, and Wendy Ferrone, and Kim Duyard, and they're all really amazing K-12 educators who do find a way to nurture their professional lives. So I'm looking forward to that conversation. So thanks again, everyone. Have a great evening or afternoon.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, everyone.